Welcome to another episode of Truckstop TV. Recently, while we were at the Museum of Fire for the 4th annual Antique and Classic Truck Show, we caught up with some inspiring enthusiasts who had brought along a recently restored truck, Puff the Tragic Waggon.
Well, Puff the Tragic Waggon came about by a need for a better way of fighting fires back in 1965 in the Hornsby district. Fire brigades in those days were mainly fellows with old 1920s and 30s vehicles adapted to fight fire with sometimes as little as a 44-gallon drum on the back. So when we were offered a Blitz truck, I guess the brigade was ready to be formed and they had something to work with. So back in 1965-66, when Hornsby was threatened by fire on a fairly regular basis, because it does live on a fairly bushland area. Obviously the residents loved the bush, but they didn't really consider that they were sitting on top of a rather hazardous situation with fire coming from the bushland when it caught fire or was set on fire by one means or another. Whether it was lightning or arsonists, it used to be always a fairly nasty situation. But the Blitz formed a part of our history as far as Hornsby Heights Brigade was concerned, which was then called the Gorge, because that's where we sitting over the top of Galston Gorge. It was part of a history now that has been formed with Terry Donnelly's help. He was our, second captain, Terry? Yeah. And I joined in 1967. I was a latecomer. And of recent times, Ted, we've used his expertise as a mechanic and engineer in restoring the vehicle back to its original condition, because when we got rid of this truck back in about 1970-71, we were given a brand new Bedford. And this truck went, as usual, for those sorts of vehicles, they went further west. And when the people in the west at Mudgee had finished with it, a farmer got it. Now, he worked it to death until it was basically down to its last shell. We found it about 10 years ago in a erosion ditch in Mudgee, where it had been left in various parts. The chassis was in one place, the cab was in another place, and the engine was over there, and he had worked it to death. We luckily got it brought back to Hornsby, and after about 8 years of restoration, with a lot of members who aren't with us today, they've left for one reason or another, we've got this truck. And now it's just a matter of keeping it in its pristine condition.
The Blitzes are a fantastic vehicle. They'll go anywhere you want them to go, and they'll do it without any struggle whatsoever. She'll go places where a lot of the new trucks today won't go. We have a very good affinity with Puff. We grew up with her virtually. We are still members of the brigade, the Hornsby Heights Brigade, even though we are not active members. We're still members of it. We still attend everything with it. This is what Puff does for a living now. She just attends these functions as they come up all year round, and she's in demand every week to just do these types of shows with it. So she's completely back as is new now. Every nut and bolt on has been replaced. Everything goes. She goes everywhere under her own power. She's loved by the public as well as she is by us. Just a normal straight six Chevy engine that was first come into production in 1938. She's not a large engine, she's not very powerful, but none of them were in that days when they were coming to manufacture. She'll do anything that you want to do with it. It's just a normal Chev straight six. It's running a 4-speed crash gearbox with a 2-speed transfer case. That's about it.
I think about 85 brake horsepower,
yeah,
Terry.
That's it. She's not large.
But it might have a fair bit of Newton meters torque. I don't know. We'd love to be able to quote that, but of course, in those days, 85 horsepower was a big engine. We're just chatting about some of the parts on the vehicle that were original. The Wisconsin 9 horsepower 4-stroke engine. When we got that back, We ran it quite a few times, and one time we were running it and there was a little bit of a dilemma because there was a nasty noise in the engine, and we pulled it apart and discovered that we'd broken some parts of the valve timing gear and the camshaft. So we hunted around, and would you believe we had one of our companions from another fire service who was at that stage restoring 4-stroke pump engines. So we looked around to see how much it would cost, and we didn't have that sort of funds because we run on a shoestring, I guess you say. And this fellow said, well, it's going to cost you about $1,100. Well, we said, well, let's have a think about that. And somebody like the Bendigo Bank came to the party and said, we'll give you the money to restore the motor on your truck. Now, that doesn't deliver any amount of water like they get out of pumps these days. But for what we did with the 2 live reels on the vehicle, we put out a lot of fire, believe me. But there was a lot of hard work involved too. There's some other parts on this vehicle that would be interesting to people who haven't got a close association with early firefighting, but we never used what they call drip torches today to light our fires. We used a flamethrower. Now, there was a problem with this flamethrower, and if you get your camera around the back here, we'll have a look at that. This flamethrower on the back of the truck was filled with about 2 gallons of kerosene. That's flammable liquid in my language. And it had a pump, and on the end of this piece here we had a flame burning all the time, and an operator used to just pump the kerosene to the front end of this, and it acted like a flamethrower that you see in war movies these days. There was a little bit of a problem with it. It never had regular straps, it just had 2 hooks that went over your shoulders, so if anything like you caught fire, you could just get rid of it. It was very labour intensive because they used to send 2 fellows with knapsacks with you in case you caught fire. That's how dangerous it was. Work cover today would absolutely ban that piece of equipment off your body. They would not let you use it. One of the things that we had fitted to the vehicle that's not standard were the lug tyres. Trying to replace those lug tyres is fairly difficult these days, if not expensive. So yes, we have Chinese tyres on the truck, but they are still there. So while they are still there and roadworthy, we're happy. But obviously you can see that there's some things you can't get back to what was, and that's unfortunate. But the rest of the vehicle, even the sign writing on the truck, is so close to what the original was, we had to compliment the person who did the sign writing. The tank, now even the pump, now that pump had to be reconditioned, and we were lucky we had a sponsor like the Bendigo Bank came to the party, and the Bendigo Bank should get credit here, as a lot of the other people who were involved with supplying parts and labour towards that restoration should be mentioned. And there's a list of about 40 people around the Hornsby district who actually were sponsors toward this truck. So we were very grateful for that.
This truck was also featured in the latest issue of Vintage Trucks and Commercials magazine. Thank you for watching Truckstop TV. Please remember to subscribe, and see you at the next Truckstop.